Hello, and welcome once again to Family Historian. My name is Stephen Conte. Tonight we are going to feature the records of the Episcopal Church. And joining me on tonight's show, I am very honored to have as my guest a very smart man. His name is Father Ed Zelley. He is the rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Metuchen, New Jersey. He also descends from a very long line of Episcopalians on his mother's side. He is a professional historian, and he is a very proud Eagle Scout. And on tonight's show, Father Ed is going to teach us how we can find our Episcopal roots. And now let's welcome Father Edmund Zelley. Father Ed, welcome to my show.
Stephen, thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be with you.
Great. I know you like being called Father Ed, so we'll call you Father Ed. My first question to you, Father Ed, what does the word Episcopal, Episcopalian mean? What does that word mean?
Well, basically, it means bishops, which describes how our church is organized. We have a hierarchical system to which bishops, episcope is the Greek word from which it descends. So it's the Episcopal Church, and if you're a member of an Episcopal Church, you're an Episcopalian.
I see. So your boss is a bishop.
Yes, he would hate that I had called him my boss.
Okay, all right.
But yes.
And what is an archbishop?
An archbishop is the head of a larger group of either Episcopalians or Anglicans, which is, of course, what the communion worldwide that the Episcopal Church in the United States of America is a part of.
Right.
So the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is sort of the figurative head, he's not our Pope.
Right.
But he has, what's the word I would want? The
authority
to, in a spiritual sense, but he doesn't lay the law.
I understand.
Episcopalians, we set our own rules as compared to the people in England, as compared to the people in India,
right,
or anywhere on the continent of Africa. But in the Episcopal Church, we don't call our archbishop an archbishop. He's called the presiding bishop.
I see.
And many of your viewers have probably seen our presiding bishop, Michael Curry. He's the one that did the famous wedding over in England a couple of years ago.
So would he be the American counterpart of the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Yes.
He would be the American counterpart.
Yeah.
Okay. And we call it Episcopal here, but it does have Anglican roots.
Yes.
I see. Now in England, the head of your church is the Queen.
That is true.
I see. Okay, but we
don't care about the Queen.
Right.
We fought a war over that a few years ago.
Right. Okay. Now let's go way back in time. Your denomination, Episcopalian, Episcopal, Anglican, has the most colorful history that I know of in religion. And it goes back to one of the most colorful monarchs in English history, Henry VIII. Now, tell us about how this began with dear old Henry VIII.
Okay. Well, Henry VIII, of course, was a monarch in England in the 1400s, and he was married to Catherine of Aragon. That was his first wife.
Right.
And he wanted children and certainly wanted a son.
Yes.
Catherine gave him a daughter, not a son.
Right. Okay.
And because of that, he wanted to move on to somebody who might be able to give him a son.
So he had a real propensity for the ladies. Is that right?
I think if you've ever seen The Tudors on HBO, you could say yes.
I see. Now, prior to this split, he was a Roman Catholic. England was a Catholic nation. Is that correct?
The first archbishops of Canterbury were all from Rome.
Right. And Catherine of Aragon was Spanish, I believe.
Yes.
And a very strict Roman Catholic.
That is correct, too.
So what did Henry do to obtain this divorce?
Well, first he did go to the Pope and ask, would you grant this? And the Pope originally was sure. He liked Henry. Henry had lots of money, lots of lands, keep everything still within the Roman Church. But the problem was that Catherine's relative, Philip, the King of Spain, had a very large army a little closer to Rome than England's was.
So this was more of a political rather than a moral issue, why the Pope would not grant him this divorce.
Absolutely. This was much more about land control and about not having the King of Spain want to come to war with the Roman Empire.
Right, and the Pope at that time, you told me, was Pope Clement VII. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. I have a friend, Father Ed, a very fine researcher, who did research at the Vatican Archive in Rome. Now that's the highest you can go. They have archives going back 1,000 years. And he found the letters between Henry VIII and Pope Clement, going back and forth, you know, and saying, give me this divorce. And it was really something. He held them in his hands, those letters. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. He had gloves on, though. Don't worry. Okay. All right. So it went back and forth. And when the Pope finally said, no, you can't do it, what did Henry do? You don't tell a king what to do.
Well, Henry just decided, well, I will create my own church. Mm-hmm. Now, it happened that in England, around the same time period, the Protestant Reformation was taking over in Europe, and there were some priests in England who were being influenced by that, mm-hmm. and started saying, well, Henry, if you would like this divorce, create your own church.
And he did.
You become the head of it, and we will grant you your divorce.
And when he got the divorce, he married, we think, was the love of his life, in the hope that she would give him a son. And who was that?
Oh, that'd be Anne then.
Anne Boleyn.
Yes.
Okay, were there women in between there?
No, well, there probably were, but they weren't wives.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
As you said, he was fond of the ladies.
Right. So then he did get the divorce, and he married Anne Boleyn. Mm-hmm. And that marriage, she did not provide him with a son either.
Nope, she didn't do very well either. And then he pretended that she had cheated on him. Right. So that's what got her head taken off.
Right. But she did give him a daughter in the person of Elizabeth I, another redhead like her father. And she took after her father, I believe.
Yep, she actually became one of the more beloved monarchs mm-hmm. for quite some time. Mm-hmm.
And so he got that divorce from her. Now, who was Thomas Cranmer? He's a big name.
Yep, he was one of the priests that I was mentioning within trying to bring about the Protestant Reformation, some of its precepts into the church. And he's also the creator of the first Book of Common Prayer,
right,
which is an essential book for Anglicans and Episcopalians.
Right, right.
And so many of the beautiful prayers that others have borrowed from us mm-hmm. are written by, we still read prayers written by Thomas Cranmer,
yes,
even in the 21st century.
Right, and he was the first Archbishop of Canterbury, mm-hmm. is that correct? Thomas Cranmer.
And he did all right up until Mary, Queen of Scots.
Right. Now, the Anglicans did come to America prior to the American Revolution in 1776. Mm-hmm. And you did bring on two pictures of the oldest Anglican church. We're saying Anglican now. It's pre-Revolutionary War. And the first one is in Jamestown.
Right.
And we have a photo of that. And it was built in 1607, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Still, if you visit Jamestown, it still stands. I don't believe it is a active house of worship anymore, but mm-hmm. it is there if you were to go to Jamestown settlement.
That was the first Anglican church on American soil.
Correct.
All right. And right here in New Jersey, there is a very ancient Anglican church in the town of
Perth Amboy.
Perth Amboy. And so we have quite an Anglican history right here in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm. And that, again, going up side by side with many of your Dutch Reformed and Presbyterians who also were very prevalent here in New Jersey as well. But in terms of Anglicans, you had there and in New Brunswick, mm-hmm. Shrewsbury,
right,
Burlington. There are a host of pre-Revolutionary War churches throughout the state.
But the very oldest one in New Jersey is in Perth Amboy.
Yes, they still have their royal charter.
They do?
Yes.
Really? Have you been to that church?
I have.
You have, okay. And how many priests do they have there?
At the moment they have none because she just got called to a new cure.
I see, okay. Now, we have to talk about the American Revolution and how it affected the Episcopalian Church. Who decided to change the name? no longer Anglican. Who was that? George Washington who did that? Because
Now, George Washington, although a member of what became the Episcopal Church,
right,
had little to do with that polity. There were other, that was much more of a clergy-oriented thing, because remember, when the Revolutionary War happens, most of the priests were British citizens,
right,
who had sworn at their ordination to be loyal to the king.
right, right.
So this presented a bit of a problem for most of them, and they fled.
I see, I see. But some did stay.
Some did stay, because they were like, okay, I like it here. I'll hang out for a while. But then they had to develop their own cadre of clergy, and because we're Episcopalians and we like bishops, this became the next little hiccup we had to get past.
Right. Now, in the Episcopalian Church, it did change the name, okay? But nowadays, in the British Commonwealth nations, it's still called Anglican.
Yes.
Like in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, but we are independent here.
That's correct.
Okay, fine. Very good. Now, you made me a very good outline here. Let's get to the how-to sources. Now, in your church, Father, you have 7 sacraments.
That's correct.
Tell our viewers, what is a sacrament?
Well, a sacrament is defined as an outward and spiritual sign of an inward and spiritual grace.
Oh,
That is the official, if you
Okay.
were in my catechism class getting ready to be confirmed, you would have to memorize that.
right. The Catholic Church has the same thing.
Yes.
And they have 7 sacraments. Now, forgive me, Father, if I'm being too simplistic. Is the Episcopalian Church really the Catholic Church without the Pope? Is that being too simplistic?
I think that's being a little simplistic. It's
Okay.
as bad as me saying that the Episcopalians are Catholic light, all the fun and half the guilt.
Oh, okay.
It's not necessarily
You said that.
true. I said that, and I'll own that one.
Yeah.
But in reality, if any of your viewers remember the Donnie and Marie show from the 70s, where one was a little bit country and the other was a little bit rock and roll,
Right.
that the Episcopal Church, because of the Protestant influence that was brought from the continent,
Yes, yes.
and because its roots originally, the Church of England being
Right.
a Roman Catholic, it's an interesting mix. There are, what we say about communion is different from the Roman Catholics.
Right.
But we are closer to the Romans than we are to our, say, Methodist or Presbyterian brothers
Right.
when they have Eucharist.
But you do ordain women now.
We do.
You do have female priests.
Since the 1970s.
All right. And can you name these sacraments, the 7 sacraments?
Don't mind if I count on my hand.
Okay.
We'll start with the 2 that are the principal sacraments, baptism and Eucharist. And we say those were ordained by Christ. You can find them in the Bible.
Right.
Then from there, you have confirmation, marriage, reconciliation, unction, and ordination.
Right. Okay. Now, of these 7, and this is the genealogy part for my viewers now, of these 7, only 3 of these sacraments have a corresponding record. Is
That is
correct?
correct,
Okay.
yes.
And in your church, you are the record keeper. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you don't have a secretary or an appointed person in your church.
No.
Now, does the bishop check up on your record keeping?
He is supposed to. The bishop is supposed to come every 3 years, and I'm supposed to show him the records. And then he's supposed to sign the book saying he has looked at the records and they seem up to date.
Right, because some churches, other churches that shall remain nameless, do not do that. Okay? All right, let's look at some of these records. And Father Ed's church, we have a replica of it on the set tonight. It was built in 1868. It's a beautiful church. I have been to it, and the inside is even more beautiful than the outside. And it's a lovely church in Metuchen, New Jersey. And we're going to show you some original records here, and Father Ed is going to read them. And the first one is a baptism record. If you can just select one there.
Okay.
Now, you have both infant and adult baptism.
That is correct.
Okay.
I think one of the more interesting ones, looking at this page that we took from it, what you can tell from it is that on November the 27th in 1870, at St. Luke's, a whole family of children whose last name was Cornish, and then we find their names were Eveline Elizabeth Stewart, Alexander Hamilton, Susie Francis, Floyd Lincoln, and Clarence Arthur. And then we get the next column will give us their date of birth.
Right.
Everything from May 23rd, 1858.
It gives the date of birth plus the date of baptism.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay,
yes.
very good. Okay.
Okay. Then it will tell us their parents, who were A. Hamilton and Eveline Stewart Cornish.
Right.
And then on the final column, it will tell us not only who were their, what sometimes are traditionally called godparents. The language we use now is sponsors.
You don't use godparents.
Well, we try not to trip people up.
That's
so
an older
it's an old term that most people
I
would
see.
recognize.
So it mentions the sponsors.
Sponsors
here.
or witnesses, the people who are there to say, yes, that's who they say they are, and we're here to support them as they grow in their life in Christ.
Right.
And again, the people are listed as the parents and apparently somebody named N. Robbins and Mrs. C. Robbins, and it looks like Tetris Kempson.
Unusual name.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, now the next sacrament that we have there, Father, would be
confirmation.
confirmation, which is very important in your religion. Is that correct?
That would be correct. Usually, especially when a child was baptized, as I was, at the age of 1 month.
Right.
I didn't answer the questions for myself.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
at a baptism, there are a series of questions that are asked.
Right. I do want to interject
Yeah.
something here, Father Ed. This is your boyhood church, is that right?
That is correct.
And this is very unusual, but Father Ed is a second-generation Episcopal priest. His dad spoke here for many years, and does he watch you on the YouTube
Yes, he
now?
does. He watches usually later in the afternoon, because he's still in retirement, takes services at other churches. But
And gives you some pointers, or?
no, at this point he's very gracious.
He must be very proud of you. I mean, you went into the same church where he was the priest.
Now that is a rare occurrence.
Very rare,
Yeah,
very rare.
To be an Episcopal priest when your dad, or in this case, and nowadays mom,
Yes,
is not as rare as one would think.
yes.
But to be in the church where you were born and raised in,
and
within the Episcopal
right,
tradition.
you inherited this church. That's wonderful.
Well, Henry VIII had a whole fight about inheriting
I
churches,
see. Okay.
so that's another thing.
And one more thing. This is very ironic because your father is of Quaker descent.
That is correct.
And your mother is the Anglican Episcopalian going way, way back. And yet your father converted to the Episcopalian religion and became a priest.
Right. Well, when you're dating an Episcopalian,
They have an influence on you.
And also he loved the liturgy, which is true of many people who aren't born into the Episcopal Church.
Right.
They come and fall in love with the way Sunday
Well, you know,
worship
I
happens.
like it too. I like it very
No,
much.
we're working on
too.
you, Stephen. We're
Right.
working on you.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to
Okay.
just select one on confirmation.
Okay, so again, confirmation generally has to be done by a bishop in our church.
Right.
Whereas in, say, the Methodist tradition, the pastor
Right.
would do it.
Right. Confirmation.
So what we have is a list. We're first told the date it happened, again, in 1870 on Sunday, February the 6th. Apparently 14 different people were confirmed on that day. And it gives their names again: Harriet Coles Lindsley, Mark Lees, Gertrude Lees, Stephen Mockeridge.
And what year is this, Father?
1870.
Okay, great. Very interesting. Let's go on to the next one, and that would be the Sacrament of Marriage.
Yep. So again,
And your records are very legible.
which I'm finding astonishing.
Thank you. I'm thanking the priest back in the 1870s here.
So again, we have a wedding in 1871 on Sunday, July the 9th. The next column tells us where it happened. In this case, it was at the rector's home, not in the
Okay.
church itself.
All right.
I don't know, can't tell you why that happened that way, but
Okay.
it does, and tells you the name of the groom and the name of the bride. And where they're from originally. So we can tell that the groom in this case, James Frederick Van Houten, was from Newark, but his betrothed was Margaret White, and she was from Metuchen. We also know how old they were.
Okay, very good.
He was 23, she was 19.
Okay.
And that their parents were both from County Morehouse, looks like, in Ireland.
Very good. That's a great find because this record takes you across the ocean.
Yep, so you could, if you kept going further, you could say, okay, well, the Van Houtens or the Whites were both from a county in Ireland.
You can continue your research. All right, now the last one that we all face someday. Now, this is not a sacrament.
That is correct.
It's burial, which is not, we call it a burial record.
That's correct.
And you can just select one there, Father.
Okay. Again, in 1872, on Tuesday, January the 30th, Clara Margarita McGarty, who was, sadly, looks like to be 18 years old.
Oh.
But again, the service happened in Metuchen. We know the date of her death was January 26th. It tells what she died of.
Yes, and what was the cause of her?
It looks like Bright's disease, which I have no idea what that is because I'm a priest, not a doctor.
Yeah, these are very explicit records. They give you the actual cause of the death.
And the other piece of information that reviewers might find helpful is it tells what cemetery they're in.
Very good.
So
very good records. I'm very impressed. Now, Father, here's a loaded question. If a church does not exist anymore, what does the researcher do? Where do they go?
Okay, they would go to our diocese, or whatever diocese the church may have existed in.
And how many, what's the plural of diocese?
Diocese.
Diocese, okay. How many are there in New Jersey? I know yours is in Trenton.
Right.
Is that correct?
There are 2 in the state of New Jersey. The other is in Newark.
Okay.
And geographically, Interstate 78 is sort of the line, if you will. It's a little jagged.
Right. So that's the one that they would go there, and those records, we hope and pray, are with the diocese.
Right.
Okay. And we're going to hold up a website for the diocese in Trenton. But if you come from another state, you can look up the diocese in your state, your geographic area.
Right.
All right. And I did have the pleasure of speaking with the archivist down there, a very wonderful man named Richard Reed. And I also have his website, his email right here. And he is very helpful and he knows his stuff. And if you go to that site, it will tell you exactly what churches have been taken care of with their records.
Okay, and it can be very helpful because sometimes you may know the general location.
Right,
and
right.
So sometimes I could get a call saying we think it may be, and they may have a rough date. I can look, and then if it's not there, be able to say, well, they may have been at this church. Go try there.
See, what I like as a genealogist, Father, is one-stop shopping. And I think I would love to do an Episcopal family because it's very easy, very agile to do because you go right to the church and then if the record is not there, you go right to the diocese. And you can do this online or you can call them. They're very, very helpful down there, I must say. Thank you, Diocese of New Jersey. Thank you very much. Now, other sources that we have printed histories, and I keep mentioning these to my viewers. And Father Zelley did bring, I have it, sir. Father Zelley did bring 2 of them. This is the one on the Episcopal Diocese of New Jersey from 1785 to 1985. It's a history of your diocese.
Right.
That's for New Jersey, okay? And then individual churches. And I know Father Zelley's church, St. Luke's in Metuchen, they have their own individual history. And you can sometimes find ancestors in here, lists of parishioners, priests. You might be descended from one of the priests. So this is a very good source. Most old churches will have a history. So, and then of course we have the Mormons who have been microfilming records for years upon years, and I know they've done a lot with the Episcopal Church. Now, I have something in my hand here before we close, which is synonymous with the Anglican Episcopal Church. And what am I holding, Father?
You are holding the Book of Common Prayer.
The Book of Common Prayer, and next to the Bible, this is very important to your...
Yeah, if you really want to know what an Episcopalian believes, you would
This
read
is
that.
it. And this you carry with you all the time. And sometimes there might be genealogical information in here. If it's handed down from family to family. Is that correct?
That is correct. Prayer books tend to be more individual. So, for instance, the one you have in my hand, in your hand, is mine.
Is yours.
It was given to me at my confirmation, but in the front of it, it has a place where my baptismal record is
Great.
there, and my wedding, I think I even managed to get put into it.
So all the genealogy...
Can be sometimes found in an old prayer book.
Right. Do you still have your father's common book of prayer?
I don't personally, but he may very well still have his original.
Right. How about your mom? Does she have any
She
from
has
her
some
ancestors?
She has some very old ones that go well back into the 1700s.
And she's from an old New Jersey family, isn't she?
No, actually, her descendants
Her ancestors.
Her ancestors were from North Carolina, and they were the founders of Tennessee.
Oh, but they were Anglicans at
yep,
that time.
Absolutely.
So they were here for the Revolution then. Okay, very good. Well, this has been a wonderful and very informative interview with Father Ed Zelley, the rector at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Metuchen, New Jersey. A beautiful, beautiful church. You must visit there. And thank you so much, Father. We have to do one of these now.
Stephen, thank you for the invitation, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you and your viewers.
Yes, and on that note, as I have been saying for 33 years, we are all descendants of ancient civilizations. Genealogy is your key to the history of your family. And so until next time, this is Stephen Conte wishing you the very best of luck in your research, and above all, happy ancestor hunting. Good night.